Alright, today's the big day. We're going to be applying this Rust-Oleum Epoxyshield floor coating to the basement. The color I chose was gray gloss, but the cool thing about this product, you can take it to the paint counter and you can have them custom shade whatever kind of tint you'd like. So they advertise that this is really mainly used for garage floors, but you can absolutely use it in a basement. It says so in the instructions. So first things first, I want to show you what comes included in a 2.5 car garage kit. So you have 2 gallons of Part B base, but these aren't full gallons, mind you, because you need to add the Part A. It's probably about that full. And of course, 2 Part A activators. You also get a paint stirring stick. You also get 2 bags of a concrete etch substance. And then you also have 2 bags of flake. Now, I'm going to highlight a couple things that I read in the directions here. So because I'm using this product in a basement floor, they don't want you to use the etch. They want you to clean the concrete floor with a TSP solution. So I'll insert a picture right now, the TSP solution that I used, and basically I just mopped the floor after I grinded off all the old paint, and I just got it as clean and bare as possible. Before we go any further, I need to mention how critical it is that you properly prep the surface prior to applying this stuff. If you want this stuff to last a good long time, then you really got to prep the surface properly. Now in my basement, concrete slab had old latex paint on it. So what I did is I took a concrete surface grinder, Bosch concrete surface grinder. I have a video out on that tool, and I ground off all the old latex paint, and then there were a few cracks in the concrete, especially where the French drain was installed. So I took a concrete patching mix, I mixed that up, filled in all the cracks, and then I went over it one more time with the concrete surface grinder to ensure that the surface was perfectly smooth. Then I vacuumed up all the concrete dust with a rigid shop vac with a HEPA filter on it, and then finally I mopped the floor with the TSP solution mixed in a mop bucket, and I allowed that to dry for about 24 hours. So that's what you should do prior to applying this product. What else do I have highlighted here? Pour all of Part A into Part B and stir thoroughly for at least 3 minutes. Alright, next thing I want to point out in the instructions here is see charts for appropriate application times and pot life. So you can apply this product between 60 degrees Fahrenheit and 85 degrees Fahrenheit, but depending on what temperature you're applying this product, it's going to change how you apply this stuff, kind of like letting the stuff mix and whatnot. So, for example, my basement is about 70 degrees, so I'm going to go with this top chart right here. So it says allow product to stand after mixing. So after we mix Part A and Part B together completely, before I can start brushing, I need to wait 30 minutes. And right before I start brushing again, it wants me to mix it together again. So after I let it sit for 30 minutes, we can start applying it. Before I start rolling, I have to wait 45 minutes after mixing. And then the pot life is going to be 2 hours. They also note that best time to paint is mid-afternoon after 1 p.m. It's not going to matter for us because we're in the basement. So that's kind of like what it's like to paint in between 60 and 70 degrees, as opposed, you know, if you're painting in the higher ranges between 81 and 85, it says start brushing immediately after mixing, and you only have a 1 hour pot life. So it's best to try and use this product in the cooler ranges because it gives you a little bit more pot life time. Alright, next thing I have noted in the instructions, they recommend for rolling application that you use a 1/2 inch nap roller, 9 inches. So I have a bunch of 9 inch wide nap rollers, and they recommend that you just use like a high quality brush to brush the edges. Now, the instructions state to apply in 4 foot by 4 foot sections so that the decorative paint chips can easily be scattered on the freshly coated surface. Maintain a wet edge to prevent lap marks and gloss differences. Toss the decorative paint chips into the wet film. This step may be skipped if chips are not desired. So I'm going to obviously apply the chips. So basically, you do your 4 foot by 4 foot section, then you just sprinkle chips on directly after. You don't want to let it sit for too long. The instructions do recommend that you have 2 people to do this job. It recommends that you have one person start trimming the edges and then have another person kind of like ready to go when it becomes time to rolling. And then after the person trimming the edges is finished with that, they can then switch to throwing chips over the paint. So one person can focus on rolling, one person can focus on throwing the chips. Dry time, surface should be ready for light foot traffic in 12 to 16 hours. Heavy items and normal foot traffic allow 24 to 48 hours, so a day or two to cure. So I think that goes over kind of like the basics of this kit. So let's mix this thing up and let's get to coating. Okay, so we're ready to mix together our first batch. And the instructions say to add part A to part B. No turning back now. So we're going to mix that in there.
Clear.
Yeah, it is clear. And then we got to mix this for at least 3 minutes. And because our temperature is about 70 degrees, we need to let this sit for 30 minutes before we can start doing the edges. I got to pause the video again here, and I really want you to listen to what I have to say here now. In the instructions, they specify that only one coat of this epoxy shield is required. However, if you want your finish to look really nice or even pristine, I would recommend at least 2 coats. If I was doing this same coating in my garage, I would absolutely do 3 coats of this stuff to make it look pristine. And then I do 2 coats of clear on top of that. But because it's my basement and I'm not too concerned, although I do want it to look nice, I'd recommend you do at least 2 coats. Now, initially I was planning on just doing 1 coat, so that's why you'll see in the next clip that I'm rolling over my previous coat that had chips down. If I could do it all over again, I'd do my first coat, lay that down really heavy, no chips, and then I'd come back in, do my second coat, apply the chips on the second coat, and that would give it a much better finish than the 1 coat they specify in the instructions. So I'd highly recommend you plan for 2 coats. And also, I highly recommend that you buy extra chips. The chips cost like $11 a bag. I recommend you get at least 2 for every 2 kits that you buy. It sounds excessive, but you can always return these chips if you don't use them. You'll find that the more chips you throw down, the more they hide imperfections, and I think the floor pops a little bit better with more chips. So buy extra chips. Don't be cheap. All right, here we are, day 2. I just mixed up my next gallon for the second coat in here, and I think this is definitely the right decision. Again, it's going to cost a little bit more, but you know, big deal. Might as well do it right. Also, something else you'll notice that I've done, which I should have done from the get-go, is I used some painter's tape and I spaced that about 2 inches off the floor. So now, when I go over this the second time with the brush on the edges, I'm going to have a really nice, crisp, clean edge. And today I'm going to be working by myself, so as I go, I'm going to have to chip. So I have just a little carpenter's pouch and a bag of chips. I actually went to Lowe's this morning and bought an extra 2 bags of chips. These little bags of chips are 11 bucks. Crazy expensive, but oh well. All right, let's get this going. Make sure you peel the tape while this coat is wet. If you wait until it dries, then you're not going to get a crisp, clean edge, and you're probably going to have a hard time ripping that paint off. Not going to come out well. Alright, so I'm going to talk about kind of my method for applying this epoxy shield. So first thing I do, get the roller really wet and heavy, and then I kind of start in the middle of the square cube that I'm planning to paint at that point in time. So I lay it down really heavy in the middle of that cube, which I was doing about a 5 foot by 5 foot cube. And then after I lay down, you know, kind of like the heavy paint in the center, then I worked towards the working edge and then the outer edge of the area where I was painting. And because this is my finish coat, I'm really trying to make sure that I get every square inch evenly coated. After I do kind of my first lay-in coat, then you'll see I'm going back over everything with the roller one more time just to make sure everything's really even. And then from here, you just start applying chips. Pretty simple.
I was trying to go for like a really even coat of chips. You can kind of come up with your own method on how you want to apply the chips. Maybe you want to go really light. Maybe you want to do like heavy bursts. This is your chance to let your imagination kind of run wild and apply these chips however you would like to. And same thing, getting the roller wet and starting in the middle and just doing my next 5x5 cube. All right, I think we're ready for a quick update as to where I'm at with this Rust-Oleum Epoxyshield basement project that I got going on here. So I did the 2 coats over here. All of this dried, and the second coat really helped out a lot. You could still see some small imperfections. That's from me getting in there a little bit too deep with the Bosch surface grinder, but take a look at that. If you ask me, that just looks really nice. I know the lighting isn't great in here. This isn't going to matter because that's getting laminate, but it just looks a million times better, and I can't wait to complete this side over here. So I've already ground down the main slab with that Bosch surface grinder. Now, as for these French drains, again, there was a little crack between the main slab and where they poured concrete over the French drain or whatever it's called. So I just finished patching up those cracks with some concrete patcher. My method for applying this stuff, I mixed up the concrete patcher into kind of the consistency of peanut butter. It was a little bit wet, but in order to get into those cracks, that's what I use. Really expensive stuff, costs like 20 bucks a bag, but I just mixed that up until it was kind of like the consistency of peanut butter, similar to like a grout consistency. And then before I applied it in the crack, I just vacuumed out the crack one more time, and I got the crack wet. Whenever you're doing concrete, you're doing patches to concrete, you want to make sure that the concrete is wet. That way the concrete will stick. If you apply concrete patch mix over dry concrete, it's not going to stick. So make sure you pre-wet your concrete. And I just wet a section, apply it down, make sure I push it down into that crack really good with my trowel. And then I smooth it over a little bit with the paintbrush. So before this side is ready for paint, I'm going to go over my concrete patches with this surface grinder, this Bosch surface grinder, one more time, and then I need to clean the surface with that floor cleaning compound, which that stuff is over here, is TSP. So I just mixed some of that with a bucket of water, and that's that. So a little bit more to go here. I think the rest is pretty much self-explanatory. So here is the finished product for this Rust-Oleum epoxy floor kit. And I gotta say I'm pretty happy with the results. I am gonna go over a few recommendations that I have. First off, I recommend you do at least 2 coats. This is what it looks like with 2 coats, and you can still, when you're looking at the glare, you can faintly see some imperfections. That's partially where I dug in too deep with the grinder, but a 3rd coat would really help smooth out spots that don't look as glossy. If I was doing this kit in my garage, in all honesty, I would do 3 coats of the epoxy floor kit, and then I would probably do 2 coats of gloss, and I think that would give it the nicest finish. Second recommendation that I have is, I didn't mention it earlier on in the instructions, but it does say in the instructions, if you do plan to do a large area that requires more than 1 kit, it recommends that you mix all the bases together to get it, an exact match in colors, so it's really consistent. You could see where I finished with this section and where the other section is over there. This is a basement, so I don't really care, but I mean, you can see that there is a slight color difference, which I was totally expecting there to be. Like, I'm not really too concerned, but they wanted you to take all the bases, just mix them in a 5-gallon bucket and then pour them back in, and I just didn't want to deal with that mess or hassle. So I mean, you can barely faintly see, well, you can see it on camera, but at the end of the day, I'm not too concerned. It's, it's a basement. Looks a hell of a lot better than what it did and it's really not that noticeable. Also, I did mop the concrete floor, so some of that is just, you know, from the mop, so, you know, whatever. Third recommendation, I would definitely recommend that you buy extra chips, extra flake. Why are we out of focus here? There we go. This camera struggles in low light. But I would recommend that you get extra flake. What's going to hide a lot of the imperfections in your floor? Why are we still out of focus here? Come on. But as I was saying, what's going to hide a lot of the imperfections in the floor is going heavy on the flake. And now in the kit, they do include 2 packages of flakes per kit, but they also sell like additional bags of flakes. They're a little expensive. They're like $11 a bag. But I would definitely recommend you buy a couple extra bags of those flakes, because it's going to look a lot better if you go a bit heavier on the flakes, in my opinion. And as I just mentioned, it's really going to help to hide little imperfections. Like along the edge where that perimeter drain was, there was a little crack in the concrete. I tried to patch it the best I could, but in between that perimeter drain and the main slab, there was a little crack still left, which, I mean, the epoxy shield really filled in most of that, but you could faintly see like little imperfections, like a little divot. You can't really see it now, but something, see, you can just faintly see that right there. But something that I did to really help hide that crack was I just took extra flake and I went really heavy on those cracks, and it really helps to hide imperfections. And the final recommendation that I have is I would recommend that you tape up your edges along the edge of whatever you're doing, because that's going to give it a nice, crisp, clean look. And basically how you go about doing the edge, you mix your part A and part B together. You know, you let it sit for the recommended time in the instructions, and then it says after a certain amount of time you can start doing the edges. I would recommend that you pre-tape your edges, or you can tape your edges while that mixture is curing, and then start painting your edges. And basically what I did, you know, I painted let me set the camera down for a second here, maybe it'll stay in focus. But basically what I did, I had like a 3 or 4 inch brush, and I'd paint this part right here, and then I'd paint out about 6 inches. And I'd do probably about a 10-foot section. Then after I was finished with that, I'd take the flake and I'd throw it up along the side. And you could see it did actually stick to the sides a bit, which that's what I was going for. But the reason you want to go like, I don't know, maybe 4, 5, 6 inches off the corner right here is because then you can take your roller and you can come up, you know, right up to your brush line, and it just makes for a seamless paint job. And also really important that after you finish doing the edges of your project, before you start rolling the main floor, make sure you remove that tape. You want to remove that tape while that paint's still wet, because it's going to make the edge a lot cleaner, a lot more crisp. So that is that. That is my recommendation. I was surprised. I actually did have quite a bit of time in terms of working pot life. So this is something that you can do by yourself. The instructions do recommend that you have somebody else with you. I would say that is helpful, but at the end of the day, this camera's absolute garbage. But at the end of the day, this is something that you can do by yourself, and you can just be assured that you will have plenty of time to work with the mix. So that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching. Sorry about this camera, but I would say I'm pretty darn happy with those results.
Mm-hmm.